Everyone in the church saw a devastated husband collapsing onto the mahogany casket, his shoulders shaking with what looked like uncontrollable grief. It was a masterclass in performance art, but I was standing right behind him when he pulled his mistress close and whispered, "Start the transfer. The old hag is finally in the ground." He thought he had just won the jackpot. He didn't realize that the old hag had left a bomb ticking in his bank account, and I was the only one holding the detonator. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The air inside the cathedral was thick enough to chew on. It smelled like a suffocating mix of floor wax, stale incense, and roughly $5,000 worth of white lilies that were already starting to droop in the heat. I was sitting in the third pew, squeezing the wood in front of me until my knuckles turned the color of bone. I watched Zane. He was standing at the front right next to the casket, looking like he was about to throw himself into the grave along with my Aunt Ophelia. He dabbed at his eyes with a silk handkerchief that looked perfectly folded, even after 20 minutes of supposed weeping. Every time a new person walked up to offer condolences, he would let out this ragged, broken exhale that sounded rehearsed. It was the same noise, at the same pitch, every single time. Tara was hovering just behind his left shoulder. Technically, she was his executive assistant, a title that Ophelia had always laughed at because Tara could barely operate a coffee machine, let alone a spreadsheet. She was wearing a black dress that was respectful enough if you didn't look too closely at the hemline, but she kept touching Zane, a hand on his lower back, a brush against his elbow. It was territorial. I saw Zane check his watch. It wasn't a quick glance. He pulled his cuff back, stared at the face of his Rolex for a solid 3 seconds, and then immediately slumped back into his grieving widower pose as the priest started the final commendation. My stomach did a slow, sick roll. Ophelia had been dead for less than a week, and Zane was checking the time like he had a tea time to catch. "He's taking it hard," the woman next to me whispered. I didn't know her name. She was wearing a hat that looked like a satellite dish. "He's an actor," I muttered, but I kept my voice low, "and not a very good one." The priest sprinkled holy water on the casket. A drop landed on Zane's sleeve, and I saw him flinch. He brushed it off instantly, a reflex of disgust that he tried to cover up by clutching his chest. I knew that look. That was the look Zane gave when a waiter brought him the wrong vintage of wine. He wasn't grieving Ophelia. He was annoyed that the ceremony was running 10 minutes over schedule. The reception line was a special kind of torture. It was moving at the speed of a glacier. I shuffled forward, my heels clicking on the marble floor, watching Zane shake hand after hand. He had this way of gripping people's shoulders, looking deep into their eyes, and nodding solemnly while looking completely vacant behind the eyes. When it was finally my turn, the air between us dropped about 20 degrees. "Stella," he said. His voice was smooth, like gravel wrapped in velvet. He reached out and took my hand. His palm was clammy, cold, and wet like a dead fish. "I'm surprised you came. Ophelia mentioned you were busy with your little projects." He meant my job as a graphic designer, which he and Ophelia had argued about for a decade. He squeezed my hand a little too hard. It wasn't a comfort squeeze. It was a warning. "I wouldn't miss it, Zane," I said, pulling my hand back. "Someone has to make sure she's actually in the box." Zane's smile didn't waver, but his jaw muscle twitched, a tiny, rhythmic spasm. Tara stepped forward then. She was holding a stack of funeral programs like they were VIP passes to a nightclub. "We're so glad you're here, Stella," she said, her voice high and breathy. She reached out to pat my arm. That was when I saw it. Her sleeve rode up just an inch. Wrapped around her wrist was a thick gold bangle encrusted with emeralds. It wasn't just any jewelry. It was the bracelet Ophelia had bought in Paris for her 50th birthday. She never took it off. She had been wearing it in the hospital 3 days before she died. I stared at the bracelet. Tara saw me looking. She didn't cover it up. She actually rotated her wrist slightly, catching the light, flaunting it. "Nice bracelet," I said, my voice shaking. "Vintage?" "Oh, this." Tara smiled, a sharp, predatory expression. "Zane gave it to me. He said Ophelia wanted her staff to have mementos, to remember her generosity. Ophelia would have sooner set herself on fire than give Tara a family heirloom." I looked at Zane. He was staring right at me, daring me to make a scene. "Do it," his eyes said. "Scream in the middle of the church. Look like the crazy niece everyone says you are." I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. "How generous," I managed to choke out. I walked away before I did something that would get me arrested. I made it to my car, an 8-year-old sedan that had seen better days, and jammed the key into the ignition. I twisted it. Click. Nothing. No roar of the engine, not even a sputter, just a dead, hollow click. "You have got to be kidding me," I whispered. I slammed my hands against the steering wheel. The rain had started, a miserable gray drizzle that turned the windshield into a blur. I checked the dashboard. No lights. Dead battery. Of course. I slumped back in the seat, watching the funeral attendees filter out to their luxury SUVs. I was trapped. I couldn't call a tow truck because my phone was sitting at 4% battery, and I needed to save it for an emergency. That was when I saw them. Zane's black limousine was parked 3 rows down. The driver was standing by the trunk with an umbrella, but Zane and Tara were standing by the rear door, exposed to the rain. They weren't hugging. They weren't crying. They were arguing. I squinted through the wet glass. Zane was red in the face. He was gesturing wildly with one hand, slashing the air. Tara was holding a cell phone, not hers. It looked too big, and she was waving it in his face. I rolled my window down just a crack, hoping the wind would carry their voices. "Said it would be done by noon." Zane's voice carried over the sound of the rain. He sounded panicked. "If the accounts are frozen, we can't pay the..." The wind swallowed the rest of the sentence. Tara shouted back, shoving the phone into his chest. "I tried the code, Zane. It's locked out. She changed it. I told you she knew." She knew. Zane grabbed the phone from her and threw it into the open back seat of the limo. He looked around, scanning the parking lot. I ducked below the dashboard, my heart hammering against my ribs. I stayed huddled in the footwell, smelling the old fast food wrappers and damp floor mats, counting to 100. When I finally peeked back up, the limo was peeling out of the parking lot, tires screeching on the wet asphalt. They were in a hurry, and they were scared. The next morning, I pulled up to the iron gates of Ophelia's estate. I expected it to be quiet, a house of mourning. Instead, there were 2 massive moving trucks parked in the driveway. Men in blue jumpsuits were hauling crates out the front door. Not furniture, art, the paintings, the sculptures. They were stripping the place. I parked my car halfway on the grass because the trucks were blocking the drive and ran toward the front door. My boots crunched loudly on the gravel. "Hey!" I shouted at a guy carrying a bust of Julius Caesar. "What are you doing? Put that back!" The mover ignored me. I stormed up the steps and nearly collided with Zane in the foyer. He was holding a clipboard and looking stressed. His tie was loosened and he looked like he hadn't slept. "What is this?" I demanded, gesturing to the chaos. "She's been dead for 48 hours, Zane. You're selling the art?" "Asset liquidation," Zane said, not even looking up from his clipboard. "Estate taxes are a nightmare, Stella. You wouldn't understand the complexities of high-level finance." "I understand that you're looting the house," I snapped. I tried to push past him toward the stairs. "I'm going to the study. Ophelia promised me her first editions." Zane stepped in front of me. He was a tall man, broad in a soft, doughy way, and he used his bulk to block the staircase. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Read it and weep, sweetheart," he said, flicking the paper at me. I unfolded it. It looked official. Heavy bond paper, legal jargon, emergency executor authority. It was dated 3 days ago. It gave Zane unilateral control over all physical and liquid assets for the purpose of debt settlement. "This is fake," I said, staring at the signature. Ophelia's signature was usually a sharp, jagged scrawl. This looked shaky, weak. She couldn't even hold a pen 3 days ago. "She was lucid," Zane lied. He didn't blink. "She wanted to make sure her debts didn't burden the family. Now leave. You're trespassing." "I have a right to get my coat," I lied. It was the only thing I could think of. "I left it here last week, in the study. It has my house keys in the pocket." "Unless you want me to call the police and tell them you're holding my property hostage." Zane stared at me. He weighed the options. Calling the cops would slow down the movers. 5 minutes, he hissed. "If you're not out in 5, I'm having security throw you out on your ass." I ran up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. The house felt wrong. It was cold, like the heating had been turned off to save money. The silence of the upstairs hallway was heavy. I burst into the study and closed the door, leaning against it for a second to catch my breath. The room was exactly as Ophelia had left it. The smell hit me instantly. Old paper, lemon polish, and the faint lingering scent of her menthol cigarettes. It was the only room the movers hadn't touched yet. I didn't have time to be sentimental. I had 5 minutes. I went straight to the desk. I pulled open the drawers. Empty. Pens, paper clips, a dried-out bottle of whiteout. Zane had already scrubbed it. Of course he had. He wasn't stupid. I checked under the blotter. Nothing. I checked the trash can. Empty. "Think, Stella, think," I whispered to myself. I paced the room. My eyes scanned the bookshelves. Wall-to-wall books. Thousands of them. Ophelia loved reading, but she loved hiding things more. She used to play games with me when I was a kid. The best hiding spot is the one everyone looks at, but nobody sees. My eyes landed on the dictionary stand in the corner. It held a massive, leather-bound copy of Webster's Second International. It was always open. Ophelia used to say she liked to learn a new word every day, but Ophelia hadn't been able to walk to the dictionary stand for months. I rushed over to it. The book was closed. Dust had settled thick on the cover, except for one spot on the spine where a fingerprint had smeared the gray film. A fresh fingerprint. I grabbed the heavy cover and heaved it open. It wasn't a book. Not anymore. The center of the pages had been hollowed out with a razor blade, creating a square cavity about 4 inches deep. Sitting inside the hollowed-out paper tomb was a silver USB drive and a folded piece of yellow legal pad paper. My heart was hammering against my throat like a trapped bird. I snatched the paper and the drive. The paper wasn't a letter. It wasn't a "My dearest Stella" note. It was a list, a chaotic scribbled column of dates and times written in Ophelia's jagged handwriting. Oct 4, 8 cow a.m., blue pill, bitter. Oct 4, 2 RPM, dizzy, hands numb. Oct 5, 8 a.m., blue pill. Zane watched me swallow. Oct 5, 3 RPM, hair falling out in clumps. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't a diary. It was a log. She knew. She knew he was doing something to her. Suddenly, the doorknob twisted. I froze. There was nowhere to go. I was standing in the middle of the room holding the evidence. "Time's up!" Zane's voice boomed from the other side of the door. I didn't have pockets. My jeans were too tight, and my shirt was tucked in. I did the only thing I could think of. I shoved the USB drive and the folded paper down the front of my bra, wincing as the sharp plastic of the drive dug into my skin. The door flew open. Zane marched in, his face purple with exertion. I said 5 minutes. What are you doing? I spun around, clutching my chest, forcing myself to hyperventilate. I gasped for air, making my wheezing sound wet and panicked. I can't. My asthma. I choked out. The dust. I stumbled sideways, grabbing the edge of the desk for support. It wasn't entirely acting. My knees actually felt weak. Zane stopped. He looked annoyed, but wary. A dead aunt was one thing. A niece dying of an asthma attack in the study was a liability he didn't need right now. "For God's sake," he muttered. He walked over to the sidebar and poured a glass of water from a crystal carafe. "Drink this and get out." He handed me the glass. His eyes narrowed as he looked at me. He wasn't looking at my face. He was looking at my chest where my hand was clutched tight over the hidden drive. "You look flushed, Stella," he said softly. "Are you sure you're feeling all right? You look like you're hiding something." I took the water with a shaking hand and downed it, praying he couldn't hear the plastic drive clicking against my ribs. "Just grief," I rasped. "Just grief, Zane." I made it back to my apartment without crashing the car, which was a miracle considering my hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the steering wheel. As soon as I locked the deadbolt, I pulled the USB drive out of my bra and threw it onto the coffee table like it was a live grenade. I called Sloan. Sloan has been my best friend since freshman year. She works in forensic accounting, which means she spends her days hunting down money that rich people try to hide from the IRS. She picked up on the second ring. "I need you," I said. "Bring your laptop. And wine. A lot of wine." 20 minutes later, Sloan was sitting on my floor, her expensive heels kicked off into the corner, typing furiously on a laptop that looked like it could launch a missile. I was pacing behind her, chewing on a thumbnail. "It's encrypted," Sloan said, not looking up. "AES 256-bit. Standard for anyone who doesn't want their life ruined. Do you have a password?" "No," I said. Zane didn't exactly hand me a sticky note. Sloan sighed and took a sip of the cheap Pinot Grigio I had poured into a mug. "Okay, let's play the game. What would a 70-year-old woman use as a password? Don't say password or 123456. Ophelia was smarter than that." "Try her birthday," I said. "July 4th, 1952, Sloan typed. Enter. A red box flashed on the screen. "Access denied." "Too obvious," Sloan muttered. "Try the address." 44 Elmwood, I said. "Enter." "Access denied." "Think, Stella," Sloan snapped. "What did she love? What did she care about more than anything else?" "Her money," I suggested. "No, that's what Zane cares about. What did she care about?" I stopped pacing. I looked at the picture of Ophelia on my mantel. It was taken 10 years ago before the sickness, before Zane really got his claws in. She was sitting in her garden, laughing, holding a massive, ugly bulldog that drooled on everything. "Barnaby," I whispered. Sloan paused. "The dog?" She loved that dog more than she loved any human being, myself included. "Try Barnaby." Sloan typed it in. Enter. "Access denied." My shoulders slumped. "It's useless. We're locked out." "Wait," Sloan said. She tilted her head. "Ophelia was old school. She didn't use lowercase. And she always shouted that dog's name because he was deaf." Sloan typed again. "Barnaby." All caps. The screen flickered. A green loading bar shot across the display. A window popped up, filled with file folders. "Bingo," Sloan said, cracking her knuckles. "We're in." We didn't high-five. The mood in the room dropped instantly as Sloan clicked on the first folder labeled Health Log Calsks. It wasn't a diary. It was a spreadsheet. Of course, Ophelia kept a spreadsheet of her own dying process. Row after row of data filled the screen. "Look at this," Sloan said, pointing at the screen. Her nail tapped the glass. "She started tracking it 6 months ago, October 4th. Zane brought me the herbal tea, tasted metallic, vomited for 3 hours." I leaned in, reading the entries. October 12th, new supplement, Vitality Boost. Zane insisted I take 2. Couldn't feel my feet by dinner. November 1st, hair coming out in the shower. Doctor says it's stress. Zane smiled when the doctor said it. December 10th. I stopped taking the pills for 2 days. Felt better. Zane found the pills in the trash. He was angry. His eyes were dead. "Jesus," I breathed. She knew she was testing him. She was building a case, Sloane corrected. She scrolled down to the bottom. The last entry was dated 4 days before she died. March 15th. He changed the bottle. Liquid this time. He watched me drink it. He didn't blink. I think this is it. If I don't wake up, check the blue bottle in the recycling. The blue bottle, I repeated. I looked at Sloane. The recycling comes on Thursdays. That's tomorrow. Sloane spun around to face me. Stella, this is bad. This isn't just a greedy husband stealing money. This is premeditated murder, documented in real time. But this file? She gestured to the screen. This is just text. A defense attorney would tear this apart. They'd say she was senile, paranoid, hallucinating from the stress. It's the truth, I argued. It's a spreadsheet, Sloane countered. We need physical proof. We need to match the symptoms to a toxin. We need the medical records. Zane has the records, I said. He's the next of kin. Then you need to go get them before he scrubs those, too, Sloane said, closing the laptop. Go to the hospital, demand the tox screen. I'll stay here and mirror this drive to a cloud server in Switzerland. The lighting in the hospital records department was yellow and humming, the kind of light that gives you a headache within 30 seconds. I stood at the counter, tapping my credit card against the linoleum. The woman behind the glass, whose name tag read Brenda Sutt, was typing at a speed of 1 key per minute. She didn't look up. I need the toxicology report for Ophelia Vance, I said for the 3rd time. She died here 4 days ago. Brenda finally stopped typing. She adjusted her glasses and looked at me with the bored expression of someone who has said no to 1,000 people and enjoyed it every time. Are you the executor of the estate? Brenda asked. I'm her niece, I said. I'm family. That's not what I asked, Brenda said. She picked up a lukewarm coffee and took a sip. HIPAA regulations are very clear. Medical records are released only to the patient or the legal representative. That's Mr. Zane Vance. He's listed right here. She tapped her screen. Mr. Vance is the one I'm investigating, I snapped. I leaned closer to the glass. Look, Brenda, I just need to see 1 page, just the blood work. I don't need the whole file. And I need $1 million and a vacation to Cabo, Brenda deadpanned. We don't always get what we want. This is a potential homicide investigation, I lied. I didn't have a badge, but I hoped the word would scare her. It didn't. Brenda actually laughed, a dry, rasping sound. If it's a homicide investigation, honey, come back with a warrant. Until then, you're just an angry relative who didn't get enough in the will. She turned back to her computer. Next! I stood there, stunned. My hands curled into fists. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the glass. But I saw the security guard in the corner, a guy with a neck the size of a tree trunk, watching me. I swallowed my rage. You're making a mistake, I said quietly. I'm following protocol, Brenda said, not looking up. Have a nice day. I walked out of the hospital into the blinding afternoon sun. I had nothing. Zane had locked the doors before I even knew there were doors to open. I was driving back to my apartment, my brain running in circles, when the low fuel light pinged on my dashboard. I looked down. I had 12 miles of range left. I pulled into a gas station on the corner of 4th and Main. It was one of those cheap stations where the pumps look like they haven't been cleaned since 1990. I got out, swiped my debit card, and selected regular. Processing. I waited. Declined. See cashier. I frowned. I knew I had money. I had just been paid on Friday. I had at least $2,000 in that account. I swiped again. Declined. See cashier. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I pulled my phone out and opened my banking app. Face ID recognized. The screen loaded. Checking account. $45 error frozen. Savings account, $0 frozen. I stared at the screen. The numbers blurred. 0, frozen. I dialed the bank's customer service number immediately, my fingers trembling. I navigated the automated hell of press 1 for English until I finally got a human. "This is Kevin. How can I help you?" "My card is declined," I said, my voice rising. "My accounts are frozen. Why?" "1 moment, please." Typing sounds. "Ah, yes. I see a flag here from the fraud department and a court order." "A court order?" I shrieked. People at the other pumps were staring at me. I didn't care. "Yes, ma'am, an injunction filed by the executor of the Vance estate. It claims you are in possession of stolen estate assets. All accounts linked to your Social Security number have been temporarily frozen pending an audit." "Stolen assets?" I shouted. "I haven't taken anything. This is retaliation." "I can't comment on the legal details, ma'am. You'll need to contact the executor's attorney to resolve the dispute. Is there anything else I can help you with?" "You can give me my money." "I can't do that. Have a nice day." Click. I stood there, holding the dead phone. I had no gas, no money, and Zane had just cut my throat from 10 miles away without even leaving his house. I had to get gas. I had to get home, and I needed cash to pay the lab fees if I ever found the poison. I drove on fumes to a strip mall on the edge of town. Quick Cash Pawn. The sign was missing the W, so it just read, "Quick Cash Pay Now." I walked in. The smell hit me instantly, stale cigarettes and desperation. Behind the counter sat a guy who looked like he was made of beef jerky. He was cleaning his fingernails with a pocket knife. I reached up and unclasped the gold necklace I was wearing. It was a thin chain with a small diamond pendant. My grandmother gave it to me for my 16th birthday. It was the only real jewelry I owned. I placed it on the glass counter. "How much?" The guy picked it up. He didn't use a loop. He just weighed it in his hand like he was guessing the weight of a deli ham. $80, he grunted. "Are you kidding?" I said. "The diamond alone is worth $300. It's vintage gold." "Gold is down," he said, dropping the necklace back on the glass. It made a sad, tinny sound. "And the diamond has a carbon spot. $80. Take it or leave it." I looked at the necklace. I thought about Grandma Vance, how she used to let me wear it when we played dress-up. I felt a tear prick the corner of my eye. "I need $200, I said. "Please, I have a car that won't make it home." The guy sighed, annoyed. He reached into the register and pulled out a stack of greasy $20 bills. He counted them out slowly. $120, he said. "Final offer. Don't make me cry." I looked at the money. 6 crumpled 20s. It wasn't enough, but it was all I had. "Fine," I whispered. He pushed the money across the counter and swept the necklace into a drawer full of other people's broken dreams. I took the cash and walked out, feeling lighter in the worst possible way. I spent the rest of the day hiding in my apartment, eating dry cereal because I couldn't afford takeout. I waited until the sun went down. Then I waited longer. At 2:45 in the morning, I pulled my car onto the service road behind Ophelia's estate. I killed the headlights and rolled to a stop about a quarter mile from the back gate. I was wearing black leggings and a black hoodie. I felt ridiculous, like a cat burglar in a bad movie. I climbed over the low stone wall that bordered the garden, wincing as a briar patch snagged my leg. The estate was dark. Zane was probably asleep in the master bedroom, dreaming of yachts. I crept toward the garage. The recycling bins were lined up by the side door. 3 massive blue plastic containers. I carefully lifted the lid of the first one. The smell was atrocious. Wet cardboard, rotting fruit, and something that smelled like shrimp shells baking in the sun. I pulled my sleeve over my nose and clicked on my small pen light, holding it between my teeth. I started digging. I moved aside a stack of glossy magazines. Architectural Digest. Forbes. Zane had already started subscribing to the rich guy catalogs. I dug deeper. Wine bottles. Dozens of them. Zane had been celebrating. Then, near the bottom, buried under a pile of wet coffee grounds, I saw it. It wasn't a pill bottle. It was a sleek, dark blue glass bottle with a minimalist label. Herbal Cleanse. Detoxify your life. I reached in. My hand brushed against something slimy, maybe a discarded melon rind, and I gagged, but I grabbed the bottle. It was empty, but not clean. There was a residue at the bottom, a thick brownish sludge. I pulled it out and shone the light on the label. There was no list of ingredients, just a website that didn't exist anymore. I wrapped the bottle in a plastic Ziploc bag I had brought with me. My hands were shaking, covered in coffee grounds and grime. Suddenly, a floodlight snapped on. I froze. The entire driveway was bathed in blinding white light. "Who's there?" a voice shouted. It wasn't Zane, it was Deeper, a security guard. I didn't wait to introduce myself. I bolted toward the wall, clutching the bag to my chest, running blindly into the darkness as a dog started barking furiously behind me. I had the bottle. Now I just had to survive long enough to test it. I didn't go home. I couldn't risk Zane waiting for me in the lobby. I drove straight to a private environmental testing lab in an industrial park on the south side of the city. It was one of those places that tested tap water for lead and soil for radon. Unassuming, gray, and open at 7 in the morning. I walked in at 7:05. I still smelled like a dumpster. I had coffee grounds smeared on my sneakers and a scratch on my shin that was throbbing in time with my pulse. The receptionist was a woman in her 50s, with hair dyed a shade of red that doesn't occur in nature. She looked at me over the top of her reading glasses, her nose wrinkling visibly. "Deliveries are around back," she said before I even opened my mouth. "I'm not a delivery," I said, walking up to the counter. I pulled the Ziploc bag out of my hoodie pocket. The blue bottle sat inside, looking innocent and terrified at the same time. "I need to analyze the residue in this, a full toxicology screen, heavy metals, pesticides, industrial solvents." The woman stared at the bag. Then she looked at my dirty hoodie. "We don't do police work. If this is evidence—" "It's not police work," I interrupted. "It's my dog. He got into something in the garage. I need to know what he swallowed." It was a weak lie, but she didn't care enough to press it. She pulled out a clipboard. "Standard screen is $100. Rush analysis is $300. Payment up front." I felt my stomach drop. I had exactly $120 in my pocket. If I paid for the rush, I'd have negative money. If I paid the standard, I'd have to wait, but I could eat. "Standard," I said, my voice tight. "How long?" 48 hours, she said, sliding the form toward me. "Sign at the bottom, and we destroy samples after 30 days. I signed the paper. My hand was shaking so bad the signature looked like a seismograph reading of an earthquake. I counted out 5 $20 bills and pushed them across the counter. They were soft and wrinkled from the pawn shop. She took the money and the bag. She handled the bag with 2 fingers, like it was radioactive waste. "We'll email you the results." I walked out of the lab with $20 to my name and a 48-hour clock ticking over my head. I needed caffeine, and I needed to charge my phone, but I couldn't afford a hotel. I went to a coffee shop 3 blocks from Sloane's office. I figured I could mooch off the Wi-Fi and wait for her to get out of her morning meetings. I bought a small black coffee, $3.50, and sat in the corner, huddled over the steam. I was trying to scrub a spot of dirt off my wrist with a napkin when the bell above the door jingled. I looked up instinctually. It was Tara. The universe has a sick sense of humor. She walked in laughing, holding a phone to her ear. She was wearing sunglasses indoors and a trench coat that cost more than my car. I froze. I pulled my hood up, praying she wouldn't see me. But the coffee shop was small, and there was only one line. She turned while waiting for her latte, and her eyes swept the room. They landed on me. She didn't look scared. She didn't look guilty. She smiled. It was a slow, curling smile that reminded me of a cat watching a mouse with a broken leg. She hung up the phone and walked right over to my table. "Stella," she cooed, "you look rough, rougher than usual." She stood close enough that I could smell her perfume. It was Ophelia's perfume, Shalimar. Then I saw the scarf. It was silk, patterned with gold chains and leopards. I had given that scarf to Ophelia for Christmas 2 years ago. My blood turned into lava. "That's her scarf," I said. My voice was low, dangerous. Tara reached up and touched the silk, feigning surprise. "Oh, this." Zane said I could take whatever I wanted from the donation pile. He said nobody else would appreciate the quality. "The donation pile," I repeated. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You're wearing a dead woman's clothes while spending her money. Do you have any shame at all?" Tara's smile vanished. Her face hardened into a mask of boredom. "You're hysterical, Stella, just like your mother was. Zane is just trying to clean up the mess Ophelia left behind. You should be grateful he's handling the estate instead of letting the bank foreclose on everything." "I know about the bottle," I whispered. I leaned in close. "I know about the herbal cleanse. I know what you put in it." Tara didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. She just looked at me with cold, dead eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said flatly. "But if you keep harassing me, I'll have to get a restraining order. And with your current financial situation, I don't think you can afford a lawyer to fight it." She turned around, grabbed her latte from the counter, and walked out without looking back. She knew, and she didn't care. I spent the night sleeping in my car in a Walmart parking lot because I was too paranoid to go home. I reclined the seat, locked the doors, and covered myself with a spare blanket I kept in the trunk. At 2:14 in the morning, my phone lit up the dark interior of the car. Restricted number. I stared at it. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew I shouldn't answer. I knew nothing good would come from it. I swiped right. "Hello?" My voice cracked. "You have a very bad habit of digging where you don't belong, Stella." It was Zane. He wasn't yelling. He sounded calm, almost gentle. I could hear classical music playing in the background. He was probably sitting in Ophelia's study drinking her scotch. "I found the log, Zane," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know you were poisoning her. I have the drive." "You have a list of delusional ramblings from a woman with dementia," Zane replied smoothly. "And you have a stolen bottle of laxatives you pulled out of the trash. That's not evidence, Stella. That's sad." "It's not laxatives," I said. "It is, if the label says it is," Zane countered. "And if you try to take that to the police, do you know what will happen? They'll see a disgruntled niece who was written out of the will, trying to frame the grieving widower. I have the doctors on my side. I have the lawyers. You have a checking account with a negative balance and a car that barely starts. I'm going to bury you," I spat. Zane chuckled. It was a dry, dusty sound. "Be careful, Stella. Accidents happen when people are stressed. They drive too fast. They miss stop signs. I'd hate for something tragic to happen to you before the funeral expenses are even paid off." The line went dead. I sat there in the dark, the silence of the parking lot pressing in on me. He wasn't scared of the evidence. He was going to make sure I never got to use it. 2 days later, Thursday, I was pacing around a public park wearing a path into the grass. I had eaten a vending machine granola bar for breakfast and nothing else. My phone pinged. Email from Tri-State Analytics. Subject, Toxicology Report. Sample, 49221. I stopped walking. I tapped the screen with a trembling finger. The PDF loaded slowly on the spotty 4G connection. I scrolled past the header, past the legal disclaimers, down to the I detected substances B section. Analyte, thallium I sulfate. Concentration, 12,500 ppm. Sumani status, critical, lethal. Thallium, the poisoner's poison, tasteless, odorless. It causes hair loss, nerve damage, and vomiting. It matched every single symptom in Ophelia's log. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for a week. I had it. I had the smoking gun. I called Sloan immediately. "I have it," I said, the moment she picked up. "It's thallium. It's in the bottle." "Oh my God," Sloan said. Okay, this is it. Where are you?" "I'm at the park on 5th. I'm coming to you. We need to take this to the district attorney right now." "No," Sloan said. "Not the DA. Zane plays golf with the DA. Bring it to me first. We need to package this perfectly. Meet me at my office in 20 minutes. Don't stop for anything." "I'm on my way," I said. I hung up and ran to my car. I merged onto the I-95 highway. Sloane's office was 10 miles away. The traffic was light for a Thursday afternoon. I was in the middle lane, doing 65 miles per hour. I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands hurt. I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see Zane's limo or a police car, but there was nothing, just a silver minivan and a blue sedan. I started to relax, just a fraction. I had the proof. It was over. Then the steering wheel jerked. It wasn't a big jerk, just a shudder, like I had hit a patch of rough pavement, but the road was smooth. I frowned. I tightened my grip. The wheel jerked again, harder this time. It vibrated violently, shaking my arms. A low hum started to rise from the front of the car, turning into a rattle. "What the hell?" I muttered. I took my foot off the gas. The car didn't slow down naturally. It felt heavy, like it was gliding on ice. I saw brake lights ahead. The silver minivan was slowing down for the exit. I moved my foot to the brake pedal. I pressed down. There was no resistance. My foot went straight to the floorboard. It felt like stepping into a bucket of warm water. The pedal was loose, lifeless. I pumped it. Once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." The speedometer read 60 miles per hour. I was closing in on the minivan, 50 feet, 40 feet. I grabbed the emergency brake lever. I knew pulling it at this speed could flip the car, but I didn't have a choice. I yanked it up. The cable snapped. I felt it pop. The lever came all the way up with 0 tension. Zane's voice echoed in my head. "Accidents happen." I was going to hit the minivan. I yanked the wheel hard to the right, aiming for the shoulder. The car swerved, tires screaming against the asphalt. I missed the minivan's bumper by inches, but I was going too fast. The car hit the gravel shoulder and fishtailed. The rear end swung out. I counter-steered, but it was too late. The world started spinning. I saw the guardrail. Then I saw the sky. Then I saw the trees. The car left the road. We went airborne for a split second, a terrifying moment of weightlessness before gravity took over. We slammed into the ditch. The sound was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It wasn't a crash. It was a scream of tearing metal and shattering glass. The front end crumpled like a soda can. My head slammed forward, then whipped back. The airbag deployed. It hit me in the face like a boxer's fist, filling the cabin with white dust and the smell of burnt chemicals. The car rolled. Once. A chaotic tumble of earth and sky. We came to rest upside down. Silence. For a moment, there was absolutely no sound. Then the hissing started. Radiator fluid dripping onto a hot engine. I was hanging by my seatbelt. My vision was blurry, swimming in red and black. I tried to take a breath, but my chest felt like it had been crushed by a vice. "Proof," I mumbled, the word bubbling up through the blood in my mouth. "I have the proof." I tried to move my arm to check my pocket for the phone, but my arm wouldn't obey. I looked down. My window was shattered. There was grass pressing against the roof. I was trapped, and Zane was probably somewhere raising a glass, checking his watch, waiting for the news. The first thing I registered was the smell. It was sharp and acidic, like burning plastic mixed with the metallic tang of old pennies. My blood. I opened my eyes. The world was sideways. A blade of grass was pressing against my cheek through the shattered driver's side window. "Stella? Stella, can you hear me?" The voice was muffled, like it was coming from underwater. I tried to turn my head, but a spike of pain shot down my neck, hot and electric. "Don't move," the voice commanded, sharper this time, closer. I saw boots, expensive leather boots sinking into the mud. Then Sloane's face appeared in the gap where the window used to be. She looked terrifying. Pale, eyes wide, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. "Sloane?" I croaked. "Oh, thank God," she breathed. She didn't waste time on comfort. She reached in through the broken window, avoiding the jagged glass. "I'm going to cut the belt. You're going to fall. Brace yourself." "How did you—" "I tracked your phone," she snapped. "Hold on." She produced a pocket knife. I heard the fabric tear. Snap. I dropped 6 inches, hitting the roof of the overturned car with a dull thud. I groaned. Every bone in my body felt like it had been rattled loose. "We have to go," Sloane said, her voice high and tight. "The fuel line is ruptured. I can smell it." She grabbed my arm, the good one, and hauled me out through the window. I scraped my hip on the frame, tearing my jeans, but I didn't feel it. Adrenaline was finally flooding my system, drowning out the pain. We stumbled up the embankment, slipping on the wet grass. When we reached the road, I looked back. My car was a crumpled ball of metal in the ditch. Smoke was curling up from the engine block. "No hospital," I gasped, leaning heavily on Sloane. "Zane will look for me at the hospital." "I know," Sloane said, opening the passenger door of her Audi. "Get in. We're going off the grid." Sloane drove like a professional stuntman. She kept checking the rearview mirror every 4 seconds. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, glance. 1, 2, 3, 4, glance. I was slumped in the passenger seat, holding a wad of napkins from her glove box against a gash on my forehead. The bleeding had slowed, but my head was throbbing a steady, heavy rhythm. "Where are we going?" I asked. My words sounded slurried. "My uncle's fishing cabin," Sloane said. "It's 2 hours north near Lake Rabun. No Wi-Fi, no landline, and the nearest neighbor is a bear." "You tracked me," I said. It was a statement, not a question. Sloane tightened her grip on the steering wheel. Her knuckles were white. "I put a locator on your phone 3 days ago. When you told me you were going to the pawn shop, you spied on me? I kept you alive," she shouted. She took a breath, forcing herself to calm down. "I knew Zane was dangerous. I knew he'd try something. When I saw your dot stop on the highway and not move for 5 minutes, I knew." I looked out the window. The trees were blurring into a green smear. I wanted to be angry, but I was too tired. She was right. If she hadn't tracked me, I'd be bleeding out in a ditch right now. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Sloane said grimly. "We have to survive the night, and I have to figure out how to stitch that cut on your arm without fainting." I looked down at my left arm. There was a slice about 3 inches long, oozing dark blood. I hadn't even noticed it. "Great," I muttered. "I hope you watched a tutorial." It was dusk when we pulled up to the cabin. It was a small wooden A-frame structure that looked like it hadn't been painted since 1980. The woods around it were silent, oppressive. Sloane killed the engine. "Okay, let's get inside." She helped me hobble to the front door. She pulled a key from under a fake rock near the porch steps. She jammed it into the lock and twisted. Nothing. The key wouldn't turn. "Come on," she hissed, jiggling it. "Don't do this to me." "It's rusted," I said, leaning against the doorframe. The cold mountain air was making my teeth chatter. "Force it." Sloane grunted and twisted harder. Snap. The key broke off in the lock. We stared at the broken metal nub. "Perfect," Sloane said. She stepped back and kicked the door. It didn't budge. "Absolutely perfect." "The window," I suggested, pointing to a small pane of glass next to the door. Sloane didn't hesitate. She took off her shoe, a designer stiletto with a heel like a spike, and smashed the glass. She reached in, unlocked the deadbolt, and shoved the door open. We stumbled inside. The air in the cabin was stale and freezing, colder than it was outside. It smelled of mildew and dust. Sloane deposited me on a dusty plaid sofa. "Stay awake," she commanded. "I need to find the first aid kit and some whiskey. For the wound, not for drinking. Okay, maybe a little for drinking." She rummaged through the kitchen cabinets, slamming doors. She came back with a rusty metal box and a bottle of Jack Daniels. "This is going to hurt," she said, pouring alcohol over a needle she had threaded with dental floss. "Just do it," I said, gripping the sofa cushions. She poured the whiskey over the cut on my arm. I screamed. It felt like liquid fire. Sloane didn't flinch. She pinched the skin together and pushed the needle through. 1 stitch, 2 stitches, 3 stitches. I focused on a water stain on the ceiling that looked like a rabbit. I counted the cracks in the wood. By the time she tied the knot on the 4th stitch, I was sweating through my clothes, but the bleeding had stopped. 2 hours later, the sun was gone. The cabin was pitch black except for the glow of the fireplace Sloane had managed to start with some old newspapers. The wind was howling outside, rattling the single-pane windows. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps on the porch. I was lying on the sofa covered in 3 wool blankets, but I couldn't stop shivering. My head felt like it was stuffed with cotton. "Sloane," I whispered, "did you hear that?" Sloane was sitting on the floor with her laptop, trying to tether it to her phone's weak signal. "Hear what?" "Outside. Footsteps." Sloane froze. She closed the laptop lid halfway, dimming the screen. We both held our breath. Crunch, crunch. It was unmistakable. Something was walking on the dry leaves near the back of the cabin. Sloane reached for the heavy iron poker from the fireplace. She stood up slowly, her shadow stretching long and distorted against the wall. "Stay here," she mouthed. She crept toward the back window. The crunching stopped. Then a heavy thud against the wood siding. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the glass to shatter, waiting for Zane's hired goons to burst in. Then a sound, a low, guttural grunt. Sloane peered through the dirty glass. She let out a breath that sounded like a deflating tire. "It's a bear," she whispered. "It's just a black bear knocking over the trash cans." I laughed. It was a hysterical, jagged sound that hurt my ribs. A bear, of course. We survive a car crash and a poisoning just to get eaten by a bear. "He's leaving," Sloane said, watching the shadow move away. "He found an empty can of beans. He's disappointed." She walked back to the fire and put another log on. Her hands were shaking. "We need to finish this, Stella. Tonight. Before the battery dies or the bear comes back." Sloane sat back down at the laptop. The screen illuminated her face, making her look like a ghost. "Okay," she said, her voice shifting into her professional mode. "We can't go to the police yet. We have the toxicology report, but Zane has the lawyers. He'll claim the sample was contaminated. He'll claim you planted it. We need a confession, or the financial equivalent of one." "How?" I asked. "Greed," Sloane said. "Zane thinks he found all the money, but Ophelia was hiding things, right? We're going to make him think she hid $5 million in an offshore account that he missed." She started typing, fast. "I'm setting up a spoofed server," she explained. "I'm sending an automated email to his personal address. It will look like it's coming from a dormant account at the Cayman National Bank. Subject, final notice of unclaimed assets. Account 8842. "He won't fall for a phishing scam," I said. "He's not an idiot." "He's desperate," Sloane corrected. "You heard him in the parking lot. He needs cash, and the email will contain a security key that is actually the date of their wedding. It adds authenticity." She hit enter. "The email is sent," she said. "Now we wait. If he clicks the link, it takes him to a fake login portal I just built. It mirrors the bank's site perfectly. When he tries to claim the funds, he'll have to input his current routing number for the transfer. And then we record his screen. We get his IP address confirming it's him. We prove he's actively trying to embezzle funds he has no legal right to. It's wire fraud. Federal." "Do it," I said. We stared at the screen. The cursor blinked. 10 minutes passed. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the wind outside. "He's not checking it," I said, losing hope. "He's probably asleep." "He's not asleep," Sloane said. "He's pacing his office, wondering if you're dead. He's checking his phone every 5 seconds." Suddenly, the screen flashed. Connection established. IP address 192.168.412. Vance Estate, Atlanta, GA. He clicked, Sloan whispered. She leaned in. Gotcha. A window opened on Sloan's screen, showing us exactly what Zane was seeing. He was on the fake login page. The mouse cursor hovered over the Claim Funds button. It hesitated. Come on, Sloan urged. Be greedy. Be the monster you are. The cursor clicked. A form appeared. Destination account details. Zane started typing. Bank of America. Routing number 061,000. Account number 8894. He's doing it, I said, my voice trembling. He's trying to steal money that doesn't even exist. Sloan was recording everything, every keystroke, every second of footage. Zane hit submit. On his screen, a loading wheel spun. On our screen, a file saved. Evidence wire fraud move. We have him, Sloan said, sitting back. A fierce grin broke across her face. He just signed his own arrest warrant. Suddenly, the connection cut. The screen went black. What happened? I asked. Sloan tapped the keys. My hotspot died. The battery is dead. Did it save? I asked, panic rising in my throat. Sloan checked the local drive. She clicked the file. It opened. We watched the replay of Zane typing his account number. It's saved, Sloan said. Now we just have to get this to someone who can put handcuffs on him. The sun was just starting to burn off the mountain mist when we finally drove back into cell service range. I watched the bars on my phone screen tick up. 1 bar, 2 bars, LTE. Sloan pulled the car onto the shoulder of the winding road, gravel crunching loudly under the tires. She didn't waste a second. She pulled up the video file, the one of Zane stealing imaginary money, and hit send. Who are you sending it to? I asked, wincing as the seatbelt dug into my bruised chest. Miller, Sloan said. He writes for the Chronicle. He's been trying to nail Zane for insider trading for years. He hates him. It's personal. She dialed a number. Miller, check your inbox. No, don't ask me how I got it. Yes, it's him. Yes, it's his IP address. We also have a toxicology report confirming thallium poisoning. We have the bottle. We're bringing it in. She listened for a moment, tapping her fingers on the steering wheel. Union Station, she said. Main concourse. Under the clock. Noon. Bring the feds, Miller. Not the local cops. Zane owns the locals. Bring the suits. She hung up and looked at me. Her face was pale. No makeup. Dark circles under her eyes. We have 3 hours to get back to the city, pick up the bottle from the lab, and get to the station. Can you do this? I touched the bandage on my forehead. I'd crawl there if I had to. We made a pit stop at the lab. The receptionist looked at my stitched arm and Sloan's mud-stained designer jeans and wisely decided not to ask questions. She handed over a sealed plastic evidence bag. Inside sat the blue bottle. It looked so small, so insignificant. Just 4 ounces of dark glass that had ended a life. Chain of custody is everything, Sloan muttered, tossing the bag into her purse. Don't touch it. If Zane's lawyers find a single fingerprint that isn't his or the lab's, they'll claim we contaminated it. We got back in the car. The city skyline was looming ahead, gray and jagged. Miller said he's setting up a perimeter, Sloan said, merging onto the highway. He showed the video to a contact at the FBI. Apparently, attempted wire fraud across state lines, even for a fake account, is enough to get them out of bed. What if Zane is there? I asked. He knows I'm not dead by now. The wreck was found empty. He doesn't know where we are, Sloan promised. He's probably shredding documents in his office. He's not going to be at a train station. She was wrong. We were 5 blocks from Union Station when the car lurched. It wasn't subtle. The back right corner of the Audi dropped, and the rim ground against the pavement with a sound like a chainsaw hitting a rock. You have got to be kidding me, Sloan screamed. She slammed her hands on the wheel. We coasted into a loading zone. We got out. The tire was shredded, not just flat, destroyed. Did we hit something? I asked, looking at the rubber ribbons. Sloane crouched down. She ran a finger along the sidewall. She held up a small silver object, a caltrop, a twisted piece of metal designed to puncture tires. "He's tracking the car," Sloane whispered. She looked around wildly at the passing traffic. "He didn't need to know where we were going. He just needed to slow us down." "Run," I said. "We have to run. It's 5 blocks." "I can't run in these heels," Sloane said. She kicked them off right there on the sidewalk. She stood in her stocking feet on the dirty concrete. "Okay, let's go." We ran. I limped, holding my ribs, gasping for air. Sloane sprinted ahead, clutching her purse like a football. People stared. We looked like lunatics, bloody, barefoot, and terrified. Union Station was a cavern of noise. Announcements echoed off the high-vaulted ceilings. The smell of pretzel dough and diesel fumes was overwhelming. "Under the clock," Sloane panted. She pointed to the massive brass clock in the center of the hall. I scanned the crowd. Commuters, tourists, a guy playing a bucket like a drum. "I see Miller," Sloane said. She pointed to a man in a beige trench coat standing near the information booth. He looked nervous. He kept checking his phone. We started pushing through the crowd toward him. Then I saw the woman in the leopard print scarf. Tara. She wasn't looking at Miller. She was looking at us. She was standing near the ticket counter, holding a phone to her ear. She saw me and her eyes went wide. She pointed. Zane stepped out from behind a pillar. He didn't look like a grieving widower anymore. He looked immaculate in a charcoal suit, but his face was twisted into a snarl. He started walking toward us. He wasn't running. He was stalking. "He's here." I grabbed Sloane's arm. "Sloane, he's right there." Miller saw us. Then he saw Zane. He didn't wave. He reached into his jacket. "Get to Miller," Sloane yelled. Zane picked up the pace. He shoved a businessman out of the way. "Stella!" he boomed. His voice carried over the noise of the station. "Stella, stop! You're hurt! You're delusional!" He was playing the concerned uncle. He was trying to control the narrative. I tried to move faster, but my leg gave out. I stumbled, crashing into a trash can. Zane was on me in seconds. He grabbed my arm, the stitched one. I screamed. He yanked me up, pulling me close. His cologne was overpowering. "You stupid little girl," he hissed in my ear. His voice was low, trembling with rage. "I gave you a chance to die quietly. Now you're going to make a scene?" "I have the bottle, Zane," I gasped, looking him in the eye. "I know about the thallium." "You have garbage," he snarled. "You have nothing. You're a drug addict who crashed her car. I'm taking you to a facility, now." He started dragging me toward the exit. His grip was like iron. "Let her go!" Sloane screamed, swinging her purse at him. Zane backhanded her. He didn't even look. He just swung his arm and connected with her face. Sloane went down hard on the marble floor. "Help!" I screamed. "He's killing me!" People stopped. Phones came out, but nobody moved to help. The bystander effect in full swing. "Mr. Vance!" The voice came from everywhere. Zane froze. He looked up. Miller was standing 10 feet away, but he wasn't alone. 6 men in windbreakers with FBI's emblazoned on the back had emerged from the crowd. 2 uniformed officers were blocking the exit. "Step away from the woman!" one of the agents shouted, his hand on his holster. Zane didn't let go. He tightened his grip on my arm. "This is a family matter," he shouted back, flashing his charm smile. It looked manic. "My niece is having a psychotic break. She was in a car accident. I'm taking her to the hospital." "We know about the transfer, Zane," Miller called out. "We saw the video. You tried to move $5 million from a ghost account into your personal checking. That's wire fraud. And we have the toxicology report." Zane's face went white. He looked at me. He looked at the agents. That was a trap," he whispered. The realization hit him. "You set me up." "Ophelia set you up," I said. "I just closed the book." He shoved me away. I fell to the floor next to Sloan. Zane turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. An agent tackled him before he took 2 steps. They hit the floor with a bone-jarring thud. "Get off me! Do you know who I am?" Zane screamed as they zip-tied his hands behind his back. "I am the executor. I am the victim here." Tara tried to slip away into the crowd. A female officer stepped in front of her. "Ms. Tara Jenkins, we have a warrant for you, too. Conspiracy to commit fraud and possession of stolen property." The officer nodded at the emerald bracelet on Tara's wrist. I sat on the cold floor of Union Station, watching them drag Zane away. He was still screaming about his lawyers. Sloan sat up, wiping blood from her lip. She looked at me and grinned. "I told you I'd get him." Zane is currently being held without bail at the Fulton County Jail. It turns out, when you try to poison a wealthy socialite and then wire fraud the federal government, the judge considers you a flight risk. The trial hasn't started yet, but his lawyer has already quit twice. The evidence from the blue bottle was irrefutable. The thallium residue matched the trace amounts found in Ophelia's hair samples, which we finally got a court order to obtain. Tara took a plea deal immediately. She rolled on Zane faster than I thought possible. She admitted to buying the herbal cleanse bottles online using Zane's credit card. She's looking at 5 years. Zane is looking at life. As for the estate, the emergency executor document was proven to be a forgery. Ophelia's actual will, which she had hidden in a safety deposit box that only Sloan could find, left everything to the person who feeds Barnaby. Since Barnaby the bulldog is currently sleeping on my rug, that person is me. I moved into the mansion last week. The first thing I did was fire the staff Zane had hired. The second thing I did was hire Sloan as the permanent financial manager of the Vance Trust. We spent last night in Ophelia's study, drinking a bottle of wine that cost more than my old car. "You know," Sloan said, looking at the empty spot on the shelf where the dictionary used to be, "she really did play the long game." "She knew I'd find it," I said. I raised my glass to the portrait of Ophelia hanging over the fireplace. She knew I was too stubborn to let him win. I think I saw the painting wink. Or maybe it was just the wine. Either way, the house is warm again, and the recycling bin is empty. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.